What if some of the most powerful plants you could grow were sitting just a few steps outside your door? Most people think herbs are only useful for seasoning food, but many herbs can do far more than that. Some attract pollinators and protect your garden naturally. Some fill the air with incredible fragrance. Others have been used in kitchens, herbal traditions, and home gardens for generations because of how useful and easy they are to grow. And the surprising part? Many of these herbs grow incredibly well in small spaces, containers, raised beds, balconies, and even neglected corners of the yard. In fact, some herbs become so productive once established that gardeners often say the same thing after growing them for the first time. I wish I had planted this sooner. Because once you experience how useful fresh herbs really are, whether for cooking, gardening, fragrance, pollinators, or everyday home use, it completely changes the way you look at your garden. Instead of growing plants that are only decorative, you start building a space that's beautiful and productive at the same time. In today's video, we're looking at 6 incredible herbs you'll wish you had started growing years ago. Some are famous kitchen staples. Others are underrated herbs most people completely overlook. But every single one of these plants can bring serious value to your garden and daily life. So before we begin, tell us in the comments, which herb do you already use the most at home? Now let's start with one of the most beloved herbs in the world. Plant number 1, basil. Basil is one of those herbs that completely changes the moment people start growing it for themselves. Most people know basil as a common kitchen herb used in pasta, pizza, soups, and sauces, but fresh homegrown basil is on an entirely different level compared to the packaged leaves sold in stores. The flavor is stronger, the aroma is richer, and once the plant becomes established, it can produce an unbelievable amount of leaves throughout the growing season. Many gardeners are shocked by how quickly a single basil plant can become one of the most frequently harvested plants in the entire garden. One reason basil is so valuable is because it grows extremely fast in warm conditions. In just a short period of time, small seedlings can turn into lush leafy plants that continuously produce fresh growth if harvested properly. And unlike some herbs that take a long time to become productive, basil rewards gardeners quickly, making it especially satisfying for beginners. Even people with small balconies or container gardens can grow large healthy basil plants successfully with only basic care. Another major benefit of basil is how useful it becomes throughout the garden itself. Its strong fragrance naturally helps attract pollinators like bees, while also helping create a healthier garden environment around vegetables such as tomatoes and peppers. That's one reason basil is commonly used in companion planting systems, where gardeners intentionally grow certain plants together for better growth and pest management. But perhaps the biggest reason people fall in love with basil is because of how often they actually use it once it's available fresh at home. Suddenly sandwiches taste better. Sauces become more flavorful. Homemade meals feel fresher and more vibrant. And once gardeners experience walking outside and harvesting fresh basil directly from the plant whenever they want, many of them realize they should have started growing it years earlier. Plant number 2, mint. Mint is one of the easiest and most rewarding herbs a person can grow because once it becomes established, it grows with incredible speed and energy. Its refreshing scent instantly stands out in the garden, and the leaves can be used in teas, drinks, desserts, sauces, and many homemade recipes. But what surprises many beginner gardeners is just how aggressively mint grows compared to most other herbs. In the right conditions, it spreads rapidly and continues producing fresh leaves for long periods with very little maintenance. One reason mint is so popular is because it's incredibly forgiving. While many herbs require careful attention to survive, mint tolerates inconsistent watering, partial shade, and a wide range of growing conditions surprisingly well. Even gardeners with very little experience often succeed with mint because the plant naturally wants to grow vigorously. In fact, many experienced gardeners actually recommend growing mint in containers because of how quickly it can spread through garden beds once established. Another reason mint becomes so valuable is because it has uses far beyond cooking alone. Fresh mint leaves are commonly added to teas, fruit drinks, salads, desserts, and infused water because of their cooling flavor and refreshing aroma. The scent alone can make outdoor spaces feel cleaner and more relaxing, especially during hot weather. Some gardeners even plant mint near seeding areas simply because brushing against the leaves releases such a pleasant fragrance into the air. And once mint starts growing successfully, many gardeners realize they always want it nearby. Unlike herbs that produce only small harvests occasionally, mint can provide large amounts of fresh growth continuously. A single healthy container can keep producing leaves again and again through much of the growing season. That constant productivity is one reason so many people say mint quickly becomes one of the most useful herbs they've ever grown. Plant number 3, rosemary. Rosemary is one of the most powerful, long-lasting herbs you can grow because it combines beauty, fragrance, toughness, and usefulness all in one plant. With its needle-like evergreen leaves and strong earthy aroma, rosemary instantly adds structure and elegance to gardens, containers, and walkways. But beyond its appearance, rosemary is especially valuable because once established properly, it can continue growing productively for many years. One of the most impressive things about rosemary is how resilient it becomes over time. This herb loves heat, sunlight, and dry conditions, making it one of the best herbs for gardeners dealing with hot climates or drought-prone areas. While some herbs struggle in extreme summer temperatures, rosemary often continues thriving with very little water once mature. That toughness makes it a favorite in low-maintenance gardens and Mediterranean-style landscapes. Rosemary is also one of the most fragrant herbs people can grow at home. Simply brushing your hand across the plant releases a powerful aroma into the air that instantly makes gardens feel richer and more alive. And because the plant stays green for much of the year in many climates, it continues adding visual interest long after softer herbs disappear for the season. Some gardeners even shape rosemary into decorative hedges or small shrubs because of how attractive and durable it becomes over time. But what truly makes rosemary unforgettable is how useful it becomes in everyday life. Fresh sprigs are used in roasted vegetables, meats, breads, soups, and homemade oils, giving food a rich flavor that dried store-bought rosemary rarely matches. And once gardeners realize they can step outside anytime and harvest fresh rosemary directly from a living plant that keeps growing bigger every year, it becomes one of those herbs they genuinely wish they had started growing much sooner. Plant number 4, thyme. Thyme is one of the most underrated herbs in home gardening because many people see it as just a small seasoning plant without realizing how incredibly useful and resilient it actually is. At first glance, thyme may not look as dramatic as larger herbs like basil or rosemary, but once it becomes established, it quietly transforms into one of the hardest working plants in the entire garden. Its tiny aromatic leaves grow densely across spreading stems, creating a soft carpet of greenery that not only looks beautiful, but also produces an incredible fragrance when touched or brushed against. One of the biggest reasons gardeners love thyme is because it thrives in conditions where many other plants struggle. Heat, dry soil, rocky ground, and neglect rarely stop thyme once it's established. In fact, thyme often performs better with less attention, making it one of the best herbs for low-maintenance gardens and busy gardeners who don't want to constantly water delicate plants. Even during hot summers, thyme can continue growing steadily while softer herbs begin wilting under stress. That resilience makes it especially valuable in modern gardens where water conservation and heat tolerance are becoming increasingly important. Another reason thyme becomes so valuable is because of how versatile it is both inside and outside the kitchen. In cooking, thyme adds deep earthy flavor to soups, roasted vegetables, chicken, potatoes, sauces, and countless homemade dishes. But beyond food, thyme also works beautifully as a landscaping herb. Some gardeners grow creeping thyme between stepping stones, around pathways, or along borders where the plant slowly spreads into fragrant mats that release scent whenever someone walks nearby. This ability to function as both a culinary herb and a decorative ground cover makes thyme far more useful than most people expect. And once gardeners experience how easy thyme is to maintain compared to many other herbs, they often wonder why they didn't start growing it earlier. It asks for very little, survives difficult conditions, smells incredible, supports pollinators with its tiny flowers, and continues returning year after year in many climates. Over time, thyme becomes one of those dependable herbs that quietly earns a permanent place in the garden simply because of how consistently useful it is. Plant number 5, oregano. Oregano is one of those herbs that surprises people the moment they start growing it themselves because of how fast, thick, and productive it becomes. Most people know oregano as the classic herb used on pizza, pasta sauces, and Mediterranean dishes, but fresh homegrown oregano has a much stronger aroma and flavor than the dried versions sitting on grocery store shelves. Once established, the plant produces dense masses of fragrant leaves that can be harvested repeatedly throughout the growing season, often far more than most families can even use fresh. One reason oregano is so popular among gardeners is because it grows aggressively with very little effort. It tolerates heat, drought, poor soil, and full sun extremely well, making it one of the easiest herbs to keep alive long-term. In fact, many gardeners notice that oregano becomes more productive as conditions become warmer and drier. Instead of constantly struggling to keep the plant healthy, they often find themselves trimming it back simply to stop it from taking over too much space. Another major advantage of oregano is how beneficial it becomes for pollinators. When allowed to flower, oregano produces clusters of tiny blooms that attract bees and beneficial insects in huge numbers. During blooming season, the plant often becomes one of the busiest spots in the garden, constantly buzzing with activity. This pollinator support helps improve the overall health of nearby vegetables and flowers, while also making the garden feel more alive and dynamic. But perhaps the biggest reason gardeners end up loving oregano is because it becomes so practical in daily life. Once you have fresh oregano growing outside your home, you begin reaching for it constantly while cooking. Homemade sauces taste richer, roasted vegetables become more flavorful, and simple meals instantly feel fresher and more satisfying. And because the plant keeps producing heavily year after year, oregano quickly becomes one of those herbs people realize they should have planted much earlier. Plant number 6, parsley. Parsley is one of the most overlooked herbs in gardening because many people think of it as nothing more than a decorative garnish sitting on the edge of a plate. But gardeners who actually grow fresh parsley quickly realize it's one of the most productive, versatile, and useful herbs they can have at home. Its lush, bright green leaves grow rapidly and continuously, creating dense, healthy foliage that can be harvested again and again throughout the growing season. And unlike herbs that only work in a few dishes, parsley ends up being useful in an enormous range of meals. One reason parsley surprises so many gardeners is because of how productive it becomes once established. A few small plants can generate constant harvests for months, especially when leaves are picked regularly. In cooler conditions, parsley often continues producing long after heat-sensitive herbs begin struggling. This long growing period makes it one of the most dependable herbs for gardeners who want continuous fresh harvests instead of short seasonal bursts. Another major advantage of parsley is how flexible it is in the garden. It grows well in containers, raised beds, small spaces, and traditional vegetable gardens, making it perfect for beginners and urban gardeners alike. Flat-leaf parsley and curly parsley both offer slightly different appearances and uses, allowing gardeners to choose varieties that best fit their cooking style or garden design. And because parsley stays relatively compact, it can fit into spaces where larger herbs might become difficult to manage. But what truly changes people's opinion about parsley is how often they begin using it once they have fresh leaves available anytime they want. Soups, rice dishes, roasted vegetables, salads, sauces, eggs, and countless homemade meals instantly become fresher and more vibrant with a handful of recently harvested parsley. Instead of being a forgotten garnish, parsley becomes a daily use herb that people reach for constantly. And after experiencing how productive, easy, and useful it is, many gardeners realize parsley was far more valuable than they ever expected. When you start growing herbs, something interesting happens. Your garden stops feeling like just a collection of plants and starts becoming something you actually use every single day. Some of these herbs bring incredible flavor into your kitchen. Some attract pollinators and help your garden thrive naturally. Others fill the air with fragrance, survive difficult conditions, and keep producing for months or even years with very little effort. And once you experience walking outside and harvesting fresh herbs whenever you want, most people end up saying the same thing. I really should have started growing these sooner. If you enjoyed this video, to subscribe to Primal Gardening for more gardening tips, medicinal plants, companion planting guides, and self-sufficient living content. Seedling. And before you go, tell us in the comments, Which herb could you not live without in your garden or kitchen?